Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Marketer of the Day podcast. We are here with Shawn Shewchuk, who is the #1 international speaker and results coach. He founded Change Your Results, which is an international change agency with clients all around the globe. Shawn hosts the award-winning Results radio broadcast. We're going to hear about how he was in a movie. We're going to hear about empowering transformation within individuals and entrepreneurs. Shawn, glad to be talking to you.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome to be here.
Awesome to have you here. So, what has you super excited, fired up, excited to jump out of bed in the morning these days?
Well, I'm always jumping out of bed. I'm one of those guys that has a lot on the go. I have the privilege of working with people right across North America and in Europe as well. And one of the things that we talk a lot about, especially lately, is productivity. There's a whole lot of reasons that I don't think we need to get into that probably a lot of the folks watching and listening will grasp and understand, especially over the last 10 or 11 months, and how we can become more productive. And a lot of us look at this from an angle, say, hey, what are the opportunities? What can I jump into? What are those things that are important? And then some of us kind of sit back and wait for something or to happen or someone else to do something. So I get the privilege to work with, and this is why I do what I do. I get the privilege to work with people all over and help them to increase their results, their output. I always say it's not about time in, it's about results out. How can I accomplish more in that same amount of time? And that's really the reality.
Okay, yeah, because we can't get more time. We just need to make better use of your time. And so the little bit you mentioned there about how sometimes people go out and get it and others wait around for it. Is that a bad thing? Should we be waiting or should we be doing?
Well, listen, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not talking about shooting from the hip necessarily, but there is that perfection doesn't exist. And so it is about getting out, stop talking, start doing. And there's a reality there. And a lot of people will say to me, Shawn, well, I don't know how. And usually that 3-letter word, HOW, tends to be an impediment for a lot of people. And if you don't know how, align yourself with somebody. Start working with a coach, get a recommendation. Call me, get working with somebody who you can work hand in hand and side by side with, who understands, who's been there, who can guide you. And if you have questions, can become a sounding board for you. And just to be clear, there's a vast difference between a coach and a mentor. A coach is somebody that's going to guide you and not be your friend. A mentor is someone that's going to help you along the way, who maybe has experience and is a friend perhaps.
Okay, and so to kind of get our heads around how this very important need of, we can't do it ourselves, and sometimes we don't know how, and we shouldn't know how because there's only so many things that one person can know. So finding either this mentor or finding this coach is so important. So I'm sure you have some kind of great stories that can give us an idea of how this works, right? Like some example of where maybe you were stuck or someone else got stuck and they used the coach or mentor to kind of unlock things. Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, I share a story. For those of you that are watching, or perhaps you even know who Bob Proctor is. Bob Proctor is pretty well known around the world as a speaker and author. Many years ago, he was holding an event in the city that I lived in. And I was at a point in time in my life where I had gone from having a good job, and I was married, and I had a bunch of rental properties, so, passive revenue. And inside of about 3 months, I lost all of that, ended up divorced and bankrupt and homeless. And I had made a decision, something had to change, and Bob Proctor was coming to town. And, I come from a very conservative, I don't mean politically conservative family where, my dad and my grandfather, the only people I know that could wring a penny out and still have money left over. And so when I phoned his office, and this is long before the internet was what it is today, and I said, hey, I hear Bob's coming to town, where and how much? And they said, oh, it's $1,500 for the weekend. And the first thing that hit me is, well, I'm not paying some guy to preach to me for 2.5 days and pay him $1,500. Nonetheless, I did go to the hotel on the Friday evening after all the guests had left the ballroom, and I walked in, and the staff were chasing me because I didn't have a name badge on, and Bob was putting whatever he was putting in his briefcase, and I walked up and extended my hand to him and said, hi, my name is Shawn, and I want to have a conversation with you about you coaching me. And Bob is a very eloquent speaker, but in person he can be very interesting and very blunt sometimes. And he pointed at the restaurant down the hall, and he said, that restaurant tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., don't be late. And I was there at 7 a.m., sat down. Bob looked at me after we shook hands, and he said, Shawn, can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. What's the most amount of money you ever earned in a year? Now, remember how I grew up. You didn't talk about money. Money was a taboo topic. You didn't get it. There was never enough money, whatever. And I looked at Bob Proctor and I said, who the hell do you think you are? And Bob smiled and he said, Shawn, it doesn't really matter. I probably made more than you. And I went, okay, a good point. He said, but it tells me how you see yourself and how you value yourself. Needless to say, we spoke for another 45 minutes or so. When he told me what the investment was to work with him, I think I had to go home and change my shorts. But I will tell you this, I ate macaroni and cheese for the next year, and I worked with Bob, and certainly was a big investment, not just money, but time and energy and effort. But it was without doubt the best decision I've ever made. I've worked with over 10,000 people and generated millions and millions of dollars in 43 different companies.
Nice.
And still doing crazy stuff.
And so, I mean, so do you ever feel like maybe it's hard to stay on track in that way? Like, like it is sometimes you sometimes fall in the trap of like, you feel like you do everything right and you still have those failures. Like you said, like there was like the divorce that hit you suddenly and the money thing hit you suddenly. I mean, have you ever gone through that where just like you do everything right, but you still get like knocked on your butt and you have to figure things out anyway?
Listen, the co-founder of Make-A-Wish Foundation, Frank Shankowitz, who just passed away in the last week or 10 days or so, I had an opportunity to interview him just 6 or 8 weeks ago. And he said to me, Shawn, we're having a similar conversation. He said, Shawn, listen to me. He said, life is not puppy dogs and lollipops. And he said, there are challenging days. Now, I choose to have good days. If you meet me, run into me anywhere, you say, Shawn, how are you? Or, hey, how are you? If you don't know who I am, I'm always going to answer. I'm always awesome. I choose to have awesome days. And I think at the end of the day, that doesn't mean, by the way, that every day everything goes my way. I have days that present their challenges, but I choose to have good days. Now, I can also make the decision, which a lot of people do, to allow those things that do happen that I don't necessarily want to happen, like the divorce or whatever, the things you mentioned that I had referenced, to ruin my day. But it's a decision. I think it was Tony Robbins that said life is predicated on decisions you make. So you can choose what kind of day you want to have. You can choose the kind of wealth you want to have. You can choose the kind of business you want to have, the career you want to have, the relationships you want to have. And if you're going to put the time, effort, energy into that, and in some cases, some money, it's going to happen.
I agree completely. And I feel like there's those many times when I have to go back to the basics and go back to the fundamentals and tap into some of those things that you mentioned. Like I'm trying to get the work done. I'm trying to solve these problems, but then I have to go back and get rid of my negative attitude or maybe unlearn these habits that are easy to fall back into. Or like you said, one or two bad things happen and you milk it into it being a whole bad day or a whole bad week. So I agree completely that you need to kind of keep those things in mind. And it's even easy for you to forget to keep on applying that pressure, and you have to just kind of keep on, doing all the silly but simple stuff that works, right? Like the morning routine and the gratitude and the mindfulness and all those kinds of fun things. And so, I mean, we've been talking about some of these kind of abstract concepts, but I know that in your bio, you have built and operated and profited from 44 companies today. And so out of all those things you've done, is there anything that like really you thought was like particularly like cool, creative, unique, or something that out of all these businesses, something you feel like talking about?
You know what? I've built a lot of companies, and building companies comes, after I guess this long comes relatively easy. I'll say this: the one constant for very close to 30 years now, it's not quite, but we're getting there, is that I've had the privilege to work with individuals. I've worked with over 10,000 people, spoken to hundreds of thousands more throughout the United States, Canada, and a few other countries. The reality of this is I get the privilege, and the cool thing for me, I get the privilege to work with awesome people who are really serious about up-leveling their results, who say, listen, you know what, I have a really great business, or maybe I have a multi-million-dollar company and I want to go to the next level, or I want to achieve real freedom. I want to spend time with my wife and my kids, or I want to travel, or whatever that is. How can I take this, what I'm doing, and change so I'm not head down and ass up, and missing out on the opportunities. And that's a reality for most high achievers or entrepreneurs today. They're doing good. But the problem is there's, in a lot of cases, and it is a problem, a glass ceiling. They can see that there's more, but how do I get there? Because we're locked into something that says this, and this is kind of a paradigm. It's also at some level a societal norm, depending on how you grew up. But in my case, and a lot of people that I have the privilege to talk to and work with, where we have to do everything. I remember being a kid and watching my dad change the oil on a semi truck that as a family we owned. And I said to him, why are you doing this? He says, well, it has to get changed. I said, yeah, but isn't there someone at the dealership that could do it? He goes, yeah, but they charge, in those days, they charge $500 or $600. Today it's probably $2,500. But, and I said, well, when I asked him these questions, he looked at me like I had 16 heads, because that is not a perspective that he had. So we get caught up in doing things that are non-productive or not high leverage activities. What are those high leverage activities that you need to be engaging in every day? What are those? How do we increase that productivity so that you can get to a place where you're only doing the things that you should be doing? The problem is we get locked in on the idea that so many things have to get done. And in my case, it'd be, I have to do it. Well, I don't have to do it. And there are people say, well, I'm just starting out and I can't afford an employee. And I share experience from stage with people. Good client of mine about 3 or 4 years ago, I just phoned him to check up and say hi and see how he was. And he said, oh, I'm putting numbers in on my accounting software. And I said, you're doing what? He said, yeah. I said, you can get a bookkeeper for $30 an hour. And it'll take him or her 2 or 3 hours. He goes, yeah, I can't hire someone. I said, no, a bookkeeper, 2 or 3 hours every couple of weeks. Most people can afford to do that. So start taking things off your plate that are stopping you, hindering you, or becoming roadblocks to actually achieving what you need to.
You make it sound so simple. You make it, it makes a lot of sense. And that right there, has been like the toughest problem for me to solve. That's taken so many years to kind of let go of the ego and learn a lot of things and like be more forward, future thinking, and say things like, well, I could just go do this real quick, but wouldn't it free up space in my head to get that thing off my plate, as you said? Or things like, well, maybe if I train someone to do it, like a bookkeeper or whatever task, it might be frustrating at first. They might do it incorrectly at first, but then a few weeks from now, it'll just run like clockwork. So, I mean, was this kind of thing that you personally struggled with too, as far as like that whole, like, it has to be done by me? And I don't mean like as far as like the childhood like poverty mindset, but even like as far as breaking your own glass ceiling and like building your own businesses. Have you like come across this like in real world last few years terms in some way?
Yeah, let's be clear. It's kind of termed this way as entrepreneur syndrome, right? I hold everything close, and if I can't do it myself, it isn't done right. And let me be the first to say right now, right here, that's wrong. Yeah, there are going to be some challenges if you're coaching somebody into it, but part of the role of leadership is being able to take that individual, whoever it is, and work with them, not over them. And human nature is, entrepreneur syndrome is, or part of it is, so we start growing this so-called business. By the way, if you have just bought yourself a job, it's not really entrepreneurship. If you have ever heard or read the book by Michael E. Gerber, E-Myth or E-Myth Revisited, he says, just because you went and incorporated a company doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur. Most so-called entrepreneurs are just technicians suffering from an entrepreneurial seizure. So if you grow your business and you hire that person to, let's say, bookkeeping, but then you stand over their shoulder and micromanage them after that coaching period, you're not really benefiting yourself or them. And chances are they're going to leave anyways, right? It's not about if they follow the path that you want them to follow. Because if they know what they're doing and they're a professional in what they do, they should know it anyways. It's about, do they get to the same result that you would have? Whether they took your path or not isn't relevant. As long as it's legal, moral, and ethical, it's fine. It's part of that letting go of the entrepreneur syndrome. Okay. And to answer your question, yeah, it took me about 15 years to let go.
Okay.
I'm not immune.
And is the secret to that like doing like the deep mental work and getting past the fear, or in like accepting some risk, or like that kind of like nurturing mentality, or like how do we get from saying I'm holding it all close, I can't do any of it, into living that ultimate lifestyle where you have the E-Myth, where you're like 2 levels removed, where there's you and the manager and the worker? Like what's the secret to getting from point A to point B?
This what I'm going to tell you applies in this with respect to your question. But there's people out there that are going to watch this and listen to this who are going to say, well, should I or shouldn't I hire a coach? Because we are pre-programmed to ask the wrong questions. The answer to your question is jump off the building and grow wings on the way down. And that's a quote from, by the way, I'm not bad. Well, yeah, there's a whole bunch, but I remember when I was working with Bob a number of years ago, and I was talking about something, and he said, jump off the building and grow wings on the way down, do it now. So think about it in these terms. You need to make a decision. It's not about, you listen to people who want to change a habit. Maybe they're smokers. And they say, well, I cut back from a pack a day to half a pack a day, or whatever that justification is. And at the end of the day, you're going to justify, or the average person is anyway. They're going to say, well, I gave 10% or 20% of what I need to download to this individual. I'm not saying you shouldn't coach, manage, or lead. What I'm saying is do that part of it, but then let go. That doesn't mean you don't have high-level oversight. That doesn't mean you don't go in and make sure it's being done right. But that there's an old adage that I manage by rope. And it very simply means that a real leader gives people enough rope to do whatever they need to do. And then that individual makes the decision whether or not that they're going to utilize that rope or use it for something else. Because if they don't do their job, then they use it for something else.
And we know what that is.
You can make that assumption.
And so do you have any fun stories like that where you gave someone the rope and you just let them go nuts and it all worked out?
I have both sides. If you're truly going to be an entrepreneur, it's a risk. If you're risk averse and you do not want to take risk, full stop, period, don't become an entrepreneur. I believe everyone has some entrepreneurial ability in them. It's whether or not they choose. And it's a conscious decision to do that, because there is massive risk in becoming an entrepreneur. This idea, by the way, there is an equal amount of risk in believing that having a traditional job is secure. There's no such thing. So the reality for most people is you need to, as I said a moment ago, jump off the building and just go. Yeah. I remember in 1999, I bought a company that was doing $100,000 a year. And within 7 years, we were doing $133 million a year. And that was really bringing in the right people. And I got to tell you something, it was painful to let go, but I've always said I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I surround myself with smart people, right? And that's really what it took. I put a brilliant individual into that big office at the top and let that individual run with it. Does that mean I wasn't involved? No, my goodness, I was involved every day, and I was there every day. But I wasn't the one hands-on. Was I involved in major decisions? Of course. But I have another scenario too, where we had a COO in a company that I was involved in that built the company for almost $3 million. These things happen, right? And there's nothing that you can do about it. You can put check stops in, but if somebody wants it bad enough, they're going to do it.
Okay. Yeah. There are things that we're in control and things that are completely out of our control. And a lot of the things that you're saying here are great lessons, great reminders for us. A lot of these things make sense of, letting go, but also having oversight and also knowing what kind of person we are. Are we the kind of person that wants risk? Well, if no, get a job knowing that you'll still have risk. You could get laid off, you could get sick, it still could happen. But if you want to pursue this entrepreneurial thing, if you've had this dream, why do the half measures? Why play around? Why not go all in? And so if someone says, this all makes sense to me, I want to keep this train rolling, I want to continue on the next level, I want to keep this conversation with Mr. Shawn happening, how does our conversation today relate to what you do and how you can help people?
Well, first thing I'll say, just in response to what you said, the individual, whether they like or don't like risk or are risk averse or not, weigh what you want. Most people get into business for freedom. Freedom is defined in 3 ways: the ability to do what you want, when you want, and with who you want. That encompasses everything. So is that worth getting rid of that, whatever it is, that aversion to something, and saying, you know what, I really want that freedom. I want the ability to do what I want, whenever I want, and with who. And so I'm going to take whatever this notion is that I have, that risk is a bad thing. Now, I'm not talking about going to the casino and putting all your money in red or black. I'm talking about as an entrepreneur. I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to jump off the building. And yes, you know what? You're going to be sitting there with clenched fists and teeth gritted and this kind of thing, and eyes closed sometimes. But that's okay. That's growth. How does this play in? Listen, I'll share a quick story with you. A gentleman came to see me about 3 years ago, 2.5 to 3 years ago. and he had a business. He was the only guy in the business. I think maybe he had a VA helping him book appointments or whatever she was doing for him. And I'll share this. We worked together for a year, and I have a program where people get only 5 at any given time get to work with me one-on-one. It's big because it's by immersion, and you're going to succeed. There is no one that's gone through it that's failed. Why do I say that? Because we're going to ensure that you succeed, and it's only people that are really dedicated. They're when I say all in, yeah, they're serious about this. And there is an investment of time, energy, effort, and money. But guess what? The return is massive. But it's not just one thing. Coaching needs to be a holistic approach. It's not about business or marketing or life or mindset. It's about all of that and many more. Because if you're successful in one area and not the other, you're gonna fall flat. So there has to be a synergy between all of those to say, you know what? Yeah, I understand what sales is. I understand what business process systems and procedures are. I need to be highly productive. I also need to pay myself first, and I need clients. So how do I go and take all of those things? Oh, and by the way, now I have to have an accountant to deal with taxes and the government and all these things. And how do I build this? And people get overwhelmed. But if you put into place those systems, procedures, and processes and say, okay, what am I going to do? And what should I be doing? And what do I need to download, delegate, and automate? Right? Because now you can focus on what's important to you, to the growth of the company, and to achieving that freedom, which is why most people get into business in the first place.
This makes a lot of sense as far as having the procedures in place, knowing someone and being connected with someone who has traveled down the path that you want to travel, because you rattled off a lot of things where if someone was trying it on their own, they get stuck here for who knows how many years. They get stuck here, but you already see this coming because you've traveled the path. So a lot of this here makes sense. And if people want to take that next step, where should they go? What websites? How do they contact you?
Absolutely. First of all, you can go to changeyourresults.com. So www, obviously, .changeyourresults.com, or you can go social media. If you punch my name into Google, Shawn Shewchuk, I'm everywhere. And for all of those listening right now, if you go to highproductivitystore.com, my brand new book just came out, Daily Motivation.
Cool. Can you give us a page? Can you flip to around a page and give us one of those days of motivation?
I can. What is the date today? 28th of January. Here, we'll take today's. So it's by date, obviously. Life is about other humans, your humans. Make time today to let those you care about know that you care. Call them, text them, email them, go visit them today. Tell them that you love them. Don't assume that they know.
Ooh, good. So you're not kidding about the whole holistic thing that we need to cover all areas and not just focus on one and neglect the others that need the whole package. And so that is changeyourresults.com and then high productivity, what again?
Store.
highproductivitystore.com to get that book called Daily Motivation. Is that right?
It is.
Then we will see everyone at highproductivitystore.com. Get that book, Daily Motivation, because that means there's no commitment. You don't have to flip through chapters and pages of the book. Just every day, flip over into that day's date and get that boost. And then also we'll see you at changeyourresults.com. If you want to add Shawn on social media, that is Shawn with a W. It's SHAWN. Last name is SHEWCHUK. That is Shawn Shewchuk from changeyourresults.com and from highproductivitystore.com. Now, Shawn, before we wrap up, wind down, is there any just final parting words that come to mind, or we just want to say goodbye?
You know what? When I have a radio show called Your Results Radio, and I'll share this. At the end of every interview, I ask a question about a golden nugget. So I'll do the same in reverse this time. You know what? There are a lot of people right now that have gone through a lot of challenges over the 9 or 10 months. They're experienced a whole bunch of range of emotions, job loss, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on. I don't want to highlight that, but I want to say this. If you're in a place today where you feel that you need more, you don't want to be bound by anything, including an employer, you have an opportunity, and it takes a decision today. No matter where you are, no matter what your background is, no matter where you come from, who your parents are, what your education level is or isn't, doesn't matter. There is a way right now for you to go out and do something to change the position you're in. Let's say you have an incredible business or you have an amazing job and you want to level up or up level where you're at, maybe not just one level, maybe way beyond, make that decision to do it. And then you know what the reality of this is? Even if you want nothing to do with a coach, reconsider that. And if you want to, call our office and set up an appointment with my assistant and we'll chat. No cost.
And what's that phone number, or is it on the website?
It's on the website. Yeah, everything's there.
Changeyourresults.com.
Changeyourresults.com. Everything's there.
And find the phone number, call an office, make a decision. Have that small win right now. Don't wait. You'll just talk yourself out of it later. Changeyourresults.com. We'll see you there. We will expect you to be calling Shawn's office and say, what do you have for me? And thanks, Shawn, for stopping by.
Thanks so much for having me.